Red Rising by Pierce Brown, the book that was supposed to make me fall in love with the sci-fi genre, and in a lot of ways, this book matched my expectations perfectly.
Interesting.
But that is not necessarily a good thing. So let's talk about this book. Also, if you're wondering why my background is different, we currently have guests, and our guest is currently using our guest room where I usually record, so it just have to be like this for now. Also, this will be 100% spoiler free. Okay, firstly, let's talk a bit about my journey with the sci-fi genre. If you don't know, then I love fantasy, and I primarily read and focus on fantasy, but I have been wanting to get a bit more into the sci-fi genre for years actually, and there have been some books that I've absolutely loved, like Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir and The Martian are great, and Mickey 7 by Edward Ashton. Those are 3 sci-fi books that I absolutely love, but primarily I've experienced that I struggle a lot with this sci-fi genre. And the primary reason is simply because I felt a lot of the characters are quite flat, and sometimes these books are just a bit too concept driven for my taste. So a lot of people have recommended again and again pick up the Red Rising trilogy and all the other books in this series, because apparently this is a very character driven sci-fi series, and I mean the hype for this series is absolutely insane. So this has been on my TBR for at least 3 years now, and I finally picked up this book, and I have some things I need to say. Before picking up this book, so many people said this is the weakest book in this whole series, and a lot of people warned me that this is like a dark Hunger Games-esque battle royale kind of book set in Mars, which is a bit more brutal. And then a lot of people say that Golden Sun and The Morning Star are a huge step up in quality. So actually, when I picked up Red Rising, I expected to give this book 3.5 stars out of 5 from all the other reviews I've heard. And the sad or good news, I don't know, is that I will probably give it that exact rating, 3.5. So let's talk about this book, what I loved about this book, what I didn't particularly love, and whether I will continue the series or not. Okay, firstly, what did I love? Firstly, I have to mention that I think the setting is incredibly fascinating, and I absolutely can't wait to learn more about all the different colors in the society and how everything is built up. If you don't know anything about the setting of Red Rising, it's basically set in a futuristic, almost dystopian future where people now live on Mars. And we're basically following this group called the Reds, which are basically at the very bottom of society. And I don't think this is a spoiler, because you literally are being told this within the first 50 pages. But basically the Reds, they believe that they are working to terraform Mars. So they have this very hands-on jobs, and they're really struggling, and they think that they're actually building a future for other generations. But lo and behold, our main character, Darrow, he discovers that this is a lie after experiencing some absolutely traumatic events in the beginning of this novel. Actually, Mars has been terraformed for many years, and now the other colors or the other classes in or on Mars are now just holding down the Reds and are basically lying to them about their status in society. So obviously after our protagonist, Darrow, experiences this very traumatic event and discovers that the Reds are almost being treated like slaves, we basically have a setup for a huge revenge story, and we basically follow Darrow as he tries to infiltrate the other colors or the other classes on Mars. So that's the first thing. I think the setting is so incredibly fascinating, and I can see there's so much potential in this world. And secondly, yes, this is a character-driven fantasy novel, and I must say that I found Darrow to be a great protagonist. Not a fantastic or new favorite yet, but I can definitely see there's a lot of potential, and I just love the setup for the revenge story. I won't even spoil it, even though it's like in the first 50 pages or so. But yeah, I'm a huge sucker for stories where someone is trying to pull off the impossible, and here we definitely have Darrow, who's going to try to infiltrate this complex and huge system and bring it down, and I just love that concept. And the third thing I must say that I loved about this book is the pacing. I mean, the pacing is absolutely ruthless. You definitely feel like there's a progression going throughout the whole story. And I also just love the aspect that this world feels brutal, and some of the situations that Darrow is put in is absolutely horrendous, but just to see how he tackles it and basically how he's just willing to do whatever it takes to actually get revenge is absolutely fascinating. So I'm all on board with this mission that Darrow is going on. Oh, I also have to mention, I think the writing style is really great. So obviously I've praised this book a lot now, but why did this not become a new favorite of mine? Well, firstly, I do have some issues with this book. Firstly, let me emphasize, I don't hate the Hunger Games trope or Battle Royale trope, but for me personally, I think the way the plot here is structured just didn't particularly work that well for me. In the first 100 pages or so, we're basically being promised that we're gonna follow a character that is going to try to infiltrate the system, and in my head, I was imagining the Mistborn trilogy or the Lies of Locke Lamora, where maybe a group will come together and really try to think about how can we infiltrate the system. system, how can we take it down, and so on. And we're also being told about all the different planets, different classes, and there's just so much potential. And I was ready for a good political sci-fi novel where maybe you had a lot of scheming and so on, but what we're being given here is instead a Hunger Games novel. It just felt like we were being promised something really, really exciting, and what we got was the Hunger Games, which is not necessarily a bad thing on in of itself, but I just didn't find that concept that interesting. Now, judging by the end of this novel, it feels like we're actually gonna get what I was hoping for in book 2, which I'm really, really excited about. I think just the issue in my head is that the setup and then Hunger Games, it just didn't really make that much sense for me, and I didn't find that concept or plot structure that exciting. That might just be me though. Now secondly, I have to mention that during these Hunger Games or Battle Royale kind of games, I don't really know how to explain it, but we're basically told that instead of like individuals competing against each other, we have these different factions or houses that are competing for power, which I think is a great concept. But what I found a bit weird is that it almost felt like the other factions were quite passive or didn't do really much, except when Darrow actually went over to them or poked them or something. Yes, I know that they do have some plotting and scheming throughout the novel, but for big parts of this book, I was just wondering, what are the other factions doing right now? Shouldn't they also be trying to get to the power or win this? It just felt like a lot of the other factions were quite passive until Darrow showed up, if that makes any sense. Now in my head, if there's all these different factions competing for power and trying to survive and so on, I would expect to see much more scheming, much more activity and so on, but that just didn't really happen. I don't really know how to explain it, but maybe someone else felt the same way, hopefully. And the third thing, and I've already mentioned, I loved Darrow and also loved some of the side characters, and the wife of Darrow definitely was a highlight or something that I definitely stuck with me. But I did also feel like some of the side characters they're not bad. They weren't bad at all, but they're not new favorites of mine. So what are my concluding thoughts, and will I continue the series? Well, firstly, did I hate this book? Definitely not. I did not hate this book. I actually enjoyed a lot of aspects of this book, especially the setting. I love the character of Darrow, and I also love how brutal this world feels. I can see so much potential in this trilogy, and what makes me really hopeful is that the way that this book ends is kind of giving me hints that I will actually get what I'm hoping for in book 2. Now secondly, I expected Red Rising to be a 3.5 star read for me, and it was. So that isn't a big surprise for me, and I've always expected that The Golden Sun and Morning Stars will be both 4.5 or even 5 out of 5 star read for me. So will I continue the series? Definitely, and I'm expecting this book to potentially be one of my favorites of the year, so fingers crossed that will actually happen. So yeah, I finally read Red Rising, and I'm so glad I did, and I absolutely can't wait to pick up Morning Star. I'm definitely aiming to read this whole trilogy this year. Have you read Red Rising? What did you think about it? Definitely let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. And as always, thank you so much for watching, and a special thanks to my patrons for support what I do here. I really appreciate it.